Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion. There's generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings. First item is the discussion of the formal agenda. Any questions about this evening's agenda? To start with, anything on tonight's agenda? No. Commissioner Thompson? Nope. And then looking ahead through April, any questions on the rolling agenda?
Sheriff, I'm not on the rolling agenda, but just wanted to mention that Teresa reached out today to tell the cities and all the electeds to try to schedule a meeting, hopefully before spring break, so that we can have a conversation about 911 reservation with all of the elected. So we're certainly going to work through everybody's schedule and to try to find a date that works for the most people, but obviously it's going to be a challenge with that many people and that many conflicts, because the only date that there's not a city council meeting is Thursdays. So we get limited on what the dates that there are available. So, but I just wanted to let you know it's not on the calendar, but it'll be on the calendar.
Yeah, selfishly, I was hoping that it would be that March 5th date. I know that most people were voting for the 27th.
So we're gonna look at all the boards' calendars too. Once we get a sense from, once we get a sense from everybody else, then we'll look at the Board of Commissioners.
Commissioner Thompson
Schedule.
I'm just reading. You'll see that we have colleagues from the Department of Land Conservation and Development here. Our LCDC hearing is on that February date, so I really hope we can go to March. Just my plea. Thank you.
I think March will probably work.
March is better for me.
Yeah, we're gonna try to do it first.
And it'll be before spring break. So it's that first week or second week.
I also had no success in going through that. It wasn't a doodle poll. It was something else that I just couldn't make it work. So
it was a survey for which days and times to
It's a
select.
survey, and Teresa might be able to.
So, yeah, I just couldn't make it work. So,
Anything else on the agenda? All right, let's go ahead and move on to the 2026 session update. And management and policy analyst.
Good job, Chair.
Very good.
Amanda Revenjack, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members of the board. So the session has started and it is moving fast. There was already one deadline that came up. It's a post work session deadline. So that means a bill has had to be posted as having a hearing and then also a work session on the calendar. It doesn't need to have happened already, but at least on the calendar for it to not have died. Unless that bill is in Ways and Means or Rules or Finance Committee or Joint Committee. So there were a few bills that we were tracking that have since died. And then upcoming deadline is on Monday, the 16th. It's the first chamber deadline. So that means when a bill has needed to pass out of the first chamber. And then just some priority bills. We have the two bills regarding local TLTs. They mirror each other, one in the House, one in the Senate. The one in the House has had a little bit more traction. Those are in terms of activity. Those are both in revenue committees, so they aren't having to adhere to those deadlines. But there was a hearing on Monday. Sorry, it's been fast. On Monday, and Commissioners Bangs and Thompson and Sheriff Phillips testified at the hearing. And then your board also submitted testimony and support. And hopefully there'll be a hearing scheduled for the Senate bill as well. The HOA bill, it was pulled for this session, so then that way we can continue to work on it to move forward with it in the next session. There are multiple transportation bills, and so staff are working with CFM and paying attention to the work that AOC is doing as well to kind of track those and engage as appropriate. So there isn't one necessarily worth highlighting right now, but just so you know, there are a handful that we're looking at closely. There's the bill that has to do with the governor's economic development package. It was amended to where the lowest tier of investment related to the fast track permit program was adjusted to be 25 million was the threshold. So it's not quite what we've been asking for, but it was lowered to what was originally discussed. And then also, also there's the bill regarding industrial symbiosis activities, in which Clatsop County is named as one of the 4 recipients or would-be recipients of technical assistance. And so that actually just passed in a work session today. And so I believe there's a fiscal attached to it, so it should be headed to Ways and Means. And then the Sustainable Harvest Levels Bill, there was a hearing on that today. Commissioner Bangs testified at the hearing, and we're working on written testimony for your board's consideration, and we should have that to you tomorrow morning. And it's another one of those with, since there was already the hearing, we have a 48-hour window, so I'll let you know kind of our timeline when I send that email.
And this is a bill with CFTLC and AOC have been involved in also.
Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Amanda?
Yeah.
Commissioner Webb?
Are we gonna get something in writing? Like you've got it.
Yes, I can send out another email of upcoming activities. I definitely will be sending one out Friday, but if you're wanting that sooner than later.
Well, it's just that what I'm finding is that because I represent the county on so many levels, especially multi-jurisdictional folks who are also tracking things. It's nice. This is, we had an OCCM meeting. And it's really nice when I can share with them, you know, what our position is on things. And in fact, I was able to send them a couple of memos that she had sent us, and it's really helpful to be able to be working with in getting other counties and multi-jurisdictional organizations, you know, getting them, because to see what we're saying, because often that means that they're saying the same things. So it really helps.
And this tracker is, you sent this out via email, so we do have it, so we can maybe forward, but.
Yeah, I can send that to you again, because I know there's a lot of emails coming down the pipeline and those can get buried.
Well, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I mean, and it happens over the weekend too, it never stops.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll send it back up to you.
Yeah. I really appreciate it, Amanda, that you're keeping on top of all this and then being nimble when all of these changes come up, being able to react to them and
Really helps.
address it. So it really does help. Thanks again for all your efforts.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you. I really appreciate staff's efforts. I appreciate the efforts of my colleagues. And what I see is that we are all much more engaged in this legislative process, which leaves us with a very good problem to have, is how to coordinate and keep up to date, communicating effectively on how to best achieve our outcomes. I spent yesterday racing across the Capitol with the AOC Executive Board, presenting our position, particularly on TLT, but also representing the Association of Oregon Counties, and part of that interaction with legislative leaders, with the co-chairs of Ways and Means, the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, the majority whip, the minority whip. I mean, everybody trying to get all of these coordinated efforts in place so that Clatsop County is well integrated in alliances and partnerships as part of the effort to do good governance in our county and everywhere. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Appreciate your efforts. And I know you were testifying in public or in person on Monday. And I think that's very important. Thanks again. Any other comments on or questions for Amanda? Yeah, great work. Thank you. Thank you for the communication.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Next item is the DLCD presentation on housing rules and procedures and impacts on Clatsop County. So we have Ethan Stuckmeyer, Housing Services Division Manager, joining us, and then Sean Edging, Senior Housing Planner from DLCD. And I also know Brett Estes, our Meet the Workforce Regional Representative this year as well. Thanks, Brett.
All right, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Sean Edging. I'm a housing planner at the Housing Accountability and Production Office, as you mentioned, and I'll pass it over to Ethan to introduce himself.
Hi, Commissioners. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Ethan Stuckmeyer. I manage the Housing Division at the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And good to see you all, and good to see you, Commissioner Thompson. I'm not sure how to address you in this forum. Commissioner Thompson, maybe double commissioner. How about that?
Oh, welcome to you both. Gail, do you want to open up a little
I
bit?
really don't. I think we've opened it up, and this is really a presentation that came about from discussion at your December 10th work session. And Commissioner Thompson could probably introduce it much better than I have, but there have been a lot of recent changes at the state level regarding procedures and regulations related to the development of housing. And so your board had some questions about how these might all impact Clatsop County and our cities. And so DLCD staff have been gracious enough to come and spend some time with you and talk about that.
Well, thank you. Thanks again for taking the time. Commissioner Thompson, would you like to say a few words to begin?
You know, thank you, Chair. This is the most exciting, most impactful work that any public servant could be engaged with. And the team at the department, at the county, all over, it's just, I want to call it magical, but there's so much hard work involved that it's that balance of both vision and meticulous attention to detail as we look at where do we want to go, how do we want to get there, and then do adaptive management along the way so that we can look at how it's working, how it's not working, the costs, the benefits, and most importantly, the results for Oregonians. So I'm delighted to welcome my colleagues here tonight and to share the grand stage with you. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah, well, I do have a slide deck that I'm happy to share screen for, so I'll get that going right here. See, 1 second. Do that. All right, are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Just the slide deck? Okay, perfect. Great. Yeah, so as mentioned, basically the purpose of today's presentation is to kind of help navigate kind of Oregon's new state housing law landscape. And we're going to be focusing on kind of two major areas in today's presentation, one being the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, and then another being the Housing Accountability and Production Office. And we're basically just going to be talking about kind of, DLCD and local government's kind of new role and involvement in these different kind of laws, and, what they mean for Clackamas County in terms of kind of implementation dynamics, that type of thing. And we'll have some time for question and answer at the end. We'll be mindful of time as we go through this presentation. And before, oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, we'll also take some time to pause for questions. There's some places where I'm sure there's going to be some questions, so we'll be mindful of that back and forth. But one of the things I also wanted to start just like right at the top is with a little bit of a disclaimer, because I think one of the things in kind of getting ready for this presentation, we observed that maybe there's a little bit of confusion about our roles and like what all would be applicable to the county and maybe a little bit of anxiety there. I just kind of wanted to reiterate a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today in terms of housing laws. Very few of them affect or apply to the county. And of the ones that do, a lot of these are things that the county has been doing already as it relates to development. We'll talk about that as we get into the presentation, but I just wanted to kind of emphasize that in case there were any concerns or anxieties around kind of the scale of a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about it. That's one of the things I just thought was really important to mention is like a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is informational. It certainly is going to have planning responsibilities, especially for a lot of cities and inside of urban growth boundaries. But because of that focus of housing development inside of urban growth boundaries that the legislature's really taken, that also means that a much smaller subset and proportion of laws really kind of go outside of urban growth boundaries and kind of affect county jurisdiction. So we'll talk about it, but I just wanted to kind of say that right out at the onset, just so that way we could be clear about that in case there were any nerves. But I'm going to also start by talking a little bit about, like, I've introduced myself as being part of HAPO, the Housing Accountability and Production Office. Ethan's introduced himself as being the manager of the Housing Division. And you're thinking, like, wait, two housing related things? What are these two different entities? What are we talking about here? How are they the same? How are they different? And so we also wanted to start a little bit with a distinction about kind of each of our roles and to talk about them a little bit. And so I'll kind of ask Ethan if he wants to speak a little bit to kind of Housing Division and the broader role that they play with kind of planning for housing production, affordability, and choice in Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, Sean did a good little elevator pitch there in terms of what the role of the Housing Division is, which is to work with local governments, particularly cities, but in some cases counties, to think through how those jurisdictions are going to be planning for housing in the long-term sense of the word. And that comes in the form of really implementation of statewide planning goal number 10, which is housing. And so when we think about the difference between the Housing Division and our kind of scope of work and what Sean will talk about under the Housing Accountability and Production Office, just keep in mind the kind of long range nature of some of the things that are happening related to the implementation of statewide planning goal 10 in the Housing Division. So these are like your traditional planning documents. So things like housing capacity analyses, housing production strategies. And then of course, we'll spend a good amount of time talking about the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis and really what that does. And in terms of the kind of overlap, and Sean, I invite you to do the overview of
Sure.
HAPO, but really when we talk about the overlap, there are some, really clear areas of overlap, and that's intentional, right? When we're talking about long range planning and kind of like implementation and housing production, there's some intersection there, and that comes in the form of guidance and technical support. It's a new era for housing planning at the state level in terms of the relationship that entities like DLCD have with local governments, who are the ones who are doing some of the real boots on the ground kind of work when it comes to meeting the state's housing goals.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of pick up just to say that, we kind of complement the long range vision that the Housing Division has with maybe some of the kind of near term implementation at the HAPO, because we're really focused much more on kind of development specific, that nexus of housing production, like actually getting development on the ground with Oregon state housing laws, right? The legislature obviously has taken a keen interest in housing over the last years, and there's a number of laws that have come on the books. And really a big part of our role, which I'll talk about more in the coming slides, is around that intersection. So a big part of our job is being kind of a resource, both to local governments and also to developers, around kind of helping facilitate that production, right? Like, we've got an application. What does the law have to say about, this particular development application? That's where we can really come in and be a support and also help navigate kind of different existing state agency programs, policies, resources, that type of thing. But we share the same overall goal. We're trying to help facilitate housing production, affordability, and choice. And we're trying to do that in partnership with our, local government partners and with housing developers. And we do that primarily through guidance and technical assistance, as we'll talk about. But with that, I'll pass it on back over to Ethan to talk through kind of that long range vision with the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis.
Nice. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it. All right. So when we talk about implementation of statewide planning goal 10, that and the long range planning that's associated with that, the obligation of local governments under statewide planning goal number 10 is that they, at the very basic sense, plan to accommodate their community's needs over the long range planning horizon, 20 years. And John, if you move through the next slide, you might think of that process in the manner that it's been conducted since 1973, and really hadn't changed until just recently, where local governments estimate their future population growth and take planning activities and run analyses to, think through the ways in which they are going to provide the capacity for in terms of acres in zoning to meet that need. And this will be a little tricky here, Sean, because you'll have to click through a couple times. But when we think about just that simple exercise of taking population projections, running it through basically a math equation of do you have enough land for to meet your housing needs, you miss these kind of things, which we'll kind of click through here. Things like affordability. When we think about population projections, like where in this assessment of capacity are we thinking about affordability? How are we thinking about the timing? What does it mean to actually assess the current underproduction, say, of housing in the current sense? And if we're just extrapolating that forward, what do we miss there? There's something left to be desired there. When we think about the efficacy of that planning process, there's no loop back. I don't know if you see that. It's a linear process. There's no like check back. Did that work? Did the actions that we took, were they actually effective to meet our housing needs? And then I think the last one, Sean, is incentives. So if we are just taking these actions to meet this goal of capacity, are we missing something in terms of the other things that might be able to feed into that equation of housing production, affordability, and choice? Are there other tools and actions that a local government can bring to the table to serve a need that is maybe not just the production, but the actual affordability and the choice associated with housing? So enter this kind of new Oregon housing needs analysis paradigm, which is an intentional suite of programs to think through all of those elements: affordability, incentives, timing, efficacy. And this slide is presented not really for you to like sit down and read all of them, although I encourage you to do so. But the most important piece of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis program is that it changes the fundamental basis upon which local governments plan for housing. Instead of each local government taking a population projection that extrapolates and perpetuates those inequities of the past and those underproduction elements and all of that kind of stuff into the future when we know it hasn't really been working, the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis takes a different approach and says, we can model and assess the statewide housing needs from both a statewide and regional level. And because of that kind of aggregation of that information and the data, we have a better sense of what the housing needs of our communities actually are. And we can start from that basis of knowing that we're actually planning towards a more accurate depiction of what our housing needs are. So if you click one more slide, Sean, just the kind of punchline here is that the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis is definitely the allocation of housing need, but it's also other things. It's a suite of programs and policies directing the implementation of statewide planning goal 10. Next slide. All right. So the ONA, the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, is not, I mean, we're here representing DLCD, but there are other agencies at play here in terms of, you know, how do you usher in this big kind of change to housing planning and this more accurate depiction that requires more data, it requires more tracking, it requires more information for local governments to base decisions around. And there are a couple other entities that are part of this process, primarily the Department of Administrative Services, Oregon Housing and Community Services, and the Department of Land Conservation and Development. So at the Department of Administrative Services, DAS, is really the economists, the kind of the demographers, the people who nerd out about, you know, the demographics of the state of Oregon and population projections. Those are the folks who are running that methodology of estimating the regional housing need and allocating that to local governments in the form of needed housing allocations and housing production targets. They do that annually. They publish that January 1st of every year, and have done that for the last 2 years. The Oregon Housing Community Services is really on task for that, like, how's it going, the efficacy part of the program. They publish information on the production of housing on an annual basis, and they also maintain these dashboards that allow folks to kind of take a telescope into some of those variables within, you know, how are our local governments doing in certain aspects. People who, you know, have 3 kids versus folks who need just an accessible housing type. And then DLCD, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, is on task to kind of manage the programmatic implementation of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, have that kind of partnership with local governments who are the true implementers of Goal 10. All right, Sean, next slide. So this looks like a complicated graphic. However, the next couple slides will seek to break it down into some more bite-sized chunks. But you remember that linear graphic that kind of was, you estimate your population projections and you kind of assess your capacity and take some actions here and there, and then you never loop back to the beginning again. This is the Goal 10 planning process under Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. And this is a key part, and this harkens back to Sean's disclaimer earlier, which this kind of, I'll call it expanded obligations under the Goal 10 planning framework under ONA apply to cities population 10,000 and greater, the 3 Portland metro counties, and then Tillamook County under the passage of Senate Bill 406 in 2023. But Goal 10's the fundamentals of planning for housing and those obligations applies to all cities. And you'll notice only a few counties highlighted here. So Sean, if you move to the next slide, I'm going to take this complicated graphic and kind of distill it into 3 points, which everybody loves 3s. They're easy to remember. So we already talked about the needed housing allocation, right? That kind of fundamental starting point, the big change under the ONA paradigm. And so when we're starting any kind of planning activity, the first most important thing to do is determine what you're actually planning towards. And so the needed housing allocation that comes to local governments from the state comes in the form of a number of units by affordability bracket. And what we know about the way in which local governments plan for housing is that information is very helpful, but there are so many other specific and unique context-sensitive elements of housing need within each local government that there's a need to kind of further contextualize that those numbers into each local government's kind of on the ground realities. So those 2 actions collectively establish this determination of housing needs. If we move into the next slide, we kind of get into these more locally initiated elements of this Goal 10 planning program. It's the housing capacity analysis of old. That's still an important element of making sure there's enough land to serve the community's needs within an urban growth boundary over the planning period. That is still an important part of what it means for a local government to take actions to accommodate needed housing. One of the other elements, though, is to think about all the other things that a local government can do outside of providing land and zoning for housing. Things like investments, things like partnerships with community members or community organizations, things like reprioritizing, the planning processes to meet those specific housing needs. And that comes in the form of a housing production strategy. And together, those 2 analyses, the housing capacity analysis and the housing production strategy, constitute the universe of local actions that a local government would take within their control to respond to their determined housing need in the step prior. And then the third step, Sean, if you move forward, is the tracking and monitoring, right? That was one of the key deficiencies of the planning paradigm of old, is we never looped back and we never checked in on how those things were going. And ONA envisions that kind of process. So there's a program called the Housing Acceleration Program. This is basically just the review that takes place on, has a local government in their establishment of what they're going to do, what actions they're going to take to meet their housing need. 1, have they done them? 2, have they adopted the analyses to begin with? And then 3, kind of like, are we seeing results? And the Housing Acceleration Program under the bill that kind of codified the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Program, HB 2001 in 2023, does envision some additional authority for the department to intervene in those instances where a local government is not adopting or taking the actions that they had committed to in those in a housing production strategy, for example, or to think through what those barriers still are in the local government processes that are still preventing them from meeting their housing goals. And that comes in the form of several different things. It is technical support to local governments, both in terms of financial and more like advisement on how to navigate state processes. But it also does, to be fully, true to the implementation of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Program, does have that element of accountability and enforcement should it be needed. It is a last resort. There are many steps that have been articulated both in statute and administrative rule to ensure that that kind of partnership and support is the first step that the state takes in that partnership with local governments to kind of get them back on track and get them the resources that they need. Okay. And we want to move through. Okay. So on the note of resources, there are the Land Conservation and Development Commission in December of 2025 adopted the administrative rules to kind of implement that Oregon Housing Needs Analysis program. There are other resources, though, outside of just the framework, the regulatory framework for implementing that are highlighted here on the screen. I won't go through all of them, but really, I kind of want to highlight the importance of DLCD and the state taking more of like an active role in providing resources and support to local governments to actually like meet these new obligations, because it is new and it is a reality check for the entire state, and so those resources become really, really important in that guidance. So I wanted to highlight those here. I think I just have one more slide, which is if you're familiar with a QR code, it's an opportunity to scan and it'll take you to that housing production dashboard that the Oregon Housing Community Services Department has published, which is really just a way for it's like a data resource for anybody in the state. You could check in on cities population 10,000 and greater, see what their latest housing production numbers are, and how that kind of feeds into their planning activities under ONA. So lots of information. Happy to answer any questions. Maybe we do that at the end, give Sean some time.
Yeah, sure. We can stop share for a minute. We can just pause for a second. Also, that last slide was just a form slide. We did not develop it specifically for this presentation because obviously we're presenting to the county. Just wanted to make that clear.
Right.
Yeah, Ms. Webb, do you have a question?
Yeah, could you share those slides with us in a way?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Thanks.
not a problem.
Great. Other questions that folks have? I can move on to the HAPO side of things.
Yeah, go ahead and move on, Sean.
Great. Yeah, and we'll have some time at the end too. All right. So let me pick this back up here. I am resharing, so hopefully you guys are able to see that. And let me know if not. But yeah, I'll pick it up to talk through kind of the HAPO side of things. So, Ethan basically just ran through kind of the long range, this kind of cycle that we're going to be having in a lot of different communities around the state around a long-term process, basically to set up our policies or programs to be conducive towards achieving greater production, achieving greater affordability, and of course, achieving greater choice for Oregonians across the state. And HAPO is a bit different. We're a lot more about that kind of on-the-ground implementation. So I'm going to run through that. I'm going to kind of run through kind of like what established our office, what do we focus on, what do we do in our kind of day-to-day. And we're really going to focus in on kind of some of the main functions that we provide to both our local government as well as housing development partners in the state. Really around kind of talking through what I'll discuss as housing laws, the kind of different laws that the legislature has adopted to help facilitate the production of housing in the state. I'll focus a little bit on kind of some of the coordination and navigation that we do with other state agencies. That is kind of something that's new that the state's trying out. And then we'll also look a little bit about some of the research and evaluation that our office is supposed to do as part of our ongoing duties. So, but first, let me start with just kind of a brief, like, what is HAPO? Where did it come from? And what is kind of our focus? So our office was actually established, we're very new. We were established in 2024 by Senate Bill 1537. This was the kind of governor's housing production package that passed in that 2024 session. It included a whole omnibus of different policies, but one of them was direction to two agencies, our agency, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, as well as the Building Codes Division in the Department of Consumer and Business Services. And that direction was for our two agencies to enter into an interagency agreement to establish a new office called the Housing Accountability and Production Office. And what does our office do? The short of it is basically we partner with local governments and housing developers to basically reduce barriers to production, right? We're looking for solutions to problems, be it a housing development application that might be struggling to navigate different agencies or might be, kind of trying to understand how housing laws might intersect with a particular project. And that's a big part of what we do. I think if I had to kind of put our main core functions into three kind of big buckets, I would say the first one that and we'll talk about all of these in greater detail. The first one's really around kind of housing law support for, different local governments and different developers. Basically, the legislature has all these laws. It can be kind of difficult to keep up with, right? I think that's definitely something that we've heard. And so one of these services that we really provide is kind of being a resource for both local governments and housing developers on how that affects development, right? And so we have a lot of means of providing technical assistance, funding for local governments to do necessary code updates to conform with different housing laws, things of that nature. A second piece or kind of service that we provide is around coordination with different state agencies. I think anybody in this room is familiar with the fact that there are a lot of different state agencies that touch on the development process. Everything from, say, wetlands to, wastewater systems, right, affects production outcomes on the ground. And sometimes those state agencies are not necessarily the best at talking to one another. And so, especially in the context of development, this can make it very challenging, right, to navigate all these different state agencies, all these different policies, programs, funding sources, that's X, Y, and Z. And so a big service that we try to provide is basically helping connect those dots. How can we help connect these agencies that might otherwise be a little bit siloed at times? And then the last piece that I think is we play a big role in kind of helping inform practices, right? So we have kind of broad direction to do research and produce guidance around kind of promising practice. I'll talk a bit about a study that we're kind of preparing that the legislature directed us to, but this is kind of general. We provide all kinds of services to not only help with compliance with the law, but we're also trying to help, what are the things that are working in the state to help facilitate production, and what can we provide there as information for other folks to benefit from. So with that, I'm going to dive a little bit more detail into each one of these. I'm going to start with the thing that I'm most comfortable with, and that's housing law support. So I've been using this word housing law, and I've been kind of referring to it, broadly. There's a specific statutory definition of what housing laws are. And basically, I won't, go into the nerdy details about like what exactly is and isn't a housing law. It's something that causes a lot of internal discussions that are very boring to anybody who doesn't pay attention to this kind of stuff. But the short of it is these are laws that the legislature has adopted to try to help facilitate the production of housing on the ground. And what I have here, this is a slide of just some like common examples of housing laws. It's not an exhaustive list, but it does cover a lot of common ones that we often end up running into. And the big thing that I want to kind of highlight here, and I will talk more specifically about some things that I think the county should be aware of in a future slide. But the thing I really wanted to emphasize here is that there's kind of two main tranches of housing laws that our office is directed to be a resource on. One is on land use related housing laws. That's the thing that I kind of spend a lot of time and energy thinking about. So in Oregon, right, with our land use planning program, local governments are the implementers of land use policy in the state, right? But the state kind of sets the broad parameters. We set the goals, we set, kind of the laws and the rules that kind of set, the boundaries of how that occurs, right? And so there's all these different types of laws that talk about this in the context of housing development. And so these are a set of laws that are really kind of designed to, kind of make the development process more straightforward and to allow a lot of different options, things like middle housing, things like that. In contrast, building code, the other tranche of these housing laws, are not that way. In Oregon, building codes are preemptive, meaning that there are no such thing as local building codes in the state of Oregon. It is all state building codes. And in fact, there's basically one set of building codes in the state, and that is basically what applies everywhere. And there's very kind of limited exceptions to that broad rule, right? And our colleagues, of course, over in the building codes division, they're the folks who administer and work with that code on a regular basis, and of course, are the folks that bring that expertise to the table in that context. Now, what are we directed to do with regard to housing law? The short answer is we're directed to be a resource on this. And we kind of have two main ways that we do that. The first one, and this is kind of basically 95% of our work, is around basically just answering questions, right? So we provide technical assistance to folks in response to how housing laws intersect with different situations. Maybe there's a development application and folks are wondering how middle housing might intersect with a particular issue. Maybe local government's doing code updates and they're wondering, hey, is this statute applicable to this situation that we're trying to write code for? And so very commonly, most of the work that we get is just folks reaching out to us in what we call informal inquiries and trying to get a better understanding of like, hey, how does the law intersect with these types of situations, right? And of course, we also have a role in kind of helping with technical assistance too. We provide resources and funding to cities to help kind of do that code work, right? And we have a number of projects already lined up to help kind of do that already. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we plan to expand this in the future. The other kind of aspect, and this is a much smaller subset of the things we do, the statute does prescribe kind of a formal process that we intake kind of allegations of housing law violations. The idea here is maybe there's a development application and there might not be agreement about how the law applies in a particular situation, right? And so the idea is that HAPO comes, we have a formal process by which we kind of see what's going on the ground. What's going on? What's the locally applicable provisions? What's the development context? What are different parties saying? And, how do housing laws, if they're even applicable to this situation, affect it, right? And of course, as part of that process, really what we try to lean into and what we try to support is a collaboration first approach, right? Our main approach when we approach any one of these types of complaints is we're looking to support kind of finding that off-ramp, finding that voluntary compliance route, and ideally, really, connecting the city with the resources that they need to ensure that implementation can happen right. And so I'll actually speak a little bit to that idea around technical assistance and funding. That's a big part of our office. We are authorized specifically, and we're directed to prioritize this idea of voluntary compliance. So we are authorized, we're given a fund to support that kind of local code work that I mentioned previously. And we're specifically authorized to kind of support local governments in complying with housing laws, to reduce permitting and land use barriers to the development of housing, and of course, to support reliable and effective implementation as it relates to residential development on the ground. And of those three, the statute says it's clear you're going to prioritize voluntary compliance. So even when we end up in that kind of formal process, a big thing that we really emphasize and what we've seen play out in our process so far is we lead with that technical assistance. Like, hey, we want to make sure that this code doesn't cause you any problems in the future. So let's make sure you have the resources necessary to kind of reduce any issues there. So I almost describe it a little bit like winning the lottery sometimes when that formal process is kicked off, because it comes with funding. It always leads with funding. And of course, I'll just add, there are other types of things that we can look into too. We have gotten a number of inquiries and requests around different things that local governments want to do to reduce permitting and development barriers. That's absolutely something we can consider. Of course, recognizing we have to prioritize that voluntary compliance. And of course, there are a broader set of principles that the legislature set out in statute around how we do that. Of course, the idea is that we're basically trying to support production, affordability, and choice, and really help local governments that are constrained on resources. So that's a big part of a lot of our focus is bridging that gap with technical assistance. Now, I did promise that we would come back to the idea of like housing laws and like what are some of the things that counties should be aware of. And the big thing I want to emphasize here is when the legislature's they've adopted a number of laws in the past years that have been really around like trying to facilitate production in the state, right? But I do want to emphasize that most of the changes in law that have occurred over the past, roughly a decade or so, have really been focused on development inside of urban growth boundaries. So if you look at most of the laws that we've adopted in the past X number of years that we would call housing laws, a lot of them are really targeted towards development inside of urban growth boundaries. Now, there's some existing housing laws that have been on the books for a long time before that do apply to counties, But the good news here is that the county is already doing it. They've already implemented it and they do it on a regular basis. I actually took that list that I provided earlier and kind of highlighted some of the laws that do affect counties. The two at the bottom here, land divisions, subdivisions, partitions, as well as just like planning and zoning hearings and review, that might sound painfully familiar if you guys have sat through any of those hearings. But these are existing laws that have been on the books for a long time, and the county basically implements them already, right? So these are just examples of things of like, hey, we have process of how we process land use applications, and what does this look like? How do we process subdivisions? All those different types of things. These are existing laws that the county's already implemented. But as we get up in this list, I think there are two that I think I would point out as just things that could be applicable to the county, and I think would be things worth tracking. The first one relates to middle housing. And it really only applies, and this is an important piece, if you guys have urban unincorporated lands, right? So urban unincorporated lands are basically lands that are inside of urban growth boundaries. They are not annexed into cities, so they are, under the county's jurisdiction, but they're basically urban. They've got urban levels of services, they've got urban levels of kind of development or zoning designations, that kind of thing. But basically through a quirk of jurisdiction, they are not annexed into the city, probably for taxation reasons. Most commonly, we find these in places like in the metro region. There's examples of it in Marion County, also examples of it in Klamath County. I'm not personally familiar, or I don't know that there are any urban unincorporated lands in Clatsop County, but that's just a thing to be aware of. Like these are areas that are kind of basically quasi-cities, but they're just not annexed. Basically, what a law that passed in 2025 kind of expanded some of the middle housing allowances to these types of lands specifically. So they might have some implications for certain counties that do have urban unincorporated lands, but it really depends on whether you have that or not. And of course, rulemaking that's going to be happening in the next year or two is really going to be important for kind of defining like, all right, what are those responsibilities? What are the parameters around how middle housing is allowed? So that's a process I'd recommend tracking if, of course, the county administers these types of lands. The other thing I wanted to point out is on the clear and objective statute. This one does impact counties with something that happens outside of urban growth boundaries. So originally, the clear and objective statute, this is a statute that requires applying clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures to the development of housing. It used to apply only inside of urban growth boundaries. And in 2023, it was expanded outside to some types of land outside of UGBs, specifically kind of areas that are rural residential, areas that are kind of urban unincorporated communities. And then I believe also a type of, I think exceptions lands is the third type of land, or things that are like have exceptions to kind of different types of like resource protections, things like that. For the most part, a lot of different counties, we've been helping kind of facilitate different code amendments where, code language might be discretionary. It might not necessarily be clear and objective to apply. That's a place where we've come in with kind of technical assistance to help local governments, kind of take on those code amendments, especially a lot of different counties. It can be applicable, especially if you have urban unincorporated communities. And it's, of course, something that we can always help out with. If you guys ever have questions, you can always reach out to us with your code and say like, hey, what are the risks here? We can always do a kind of courtesy audit for those types of situations. And of course, I also just mentioned too that we had that formal process for housing law complaints that can happen in development application. I'll just add that we're working on kind of a process that we call voluntary compliance assistance, basically where like a local government can reach out to us if they've got an issue, and we can do an audit, see if there's an issue that we can help bridge the gap with funding to support them to do code amendments. So with that, I wanted to move on to housing navigation, but maybe before I do that, just because I know there might be questions about different applicable laws, and that was a lot of information in a short period of time, just to see if folks have any questions.
Sean, go ahead.
Okay, great. All right. So I'm going to move on just to kind of those two other buckets. So housing navigation and kind of the research and guidance piece of it. So with housing navigation, the idea that I mentioned here is that we have all these different state agencies, many of whom touch the development process, not necessarily the best at coordinating with one another on the shared goal of housing production. And so the idea here is that our office can help be a bridge between these different agencies. So that way, if, there's a development application, it's not like 6 agencies that they need to go to and figure out all the individual nuances and quirks of each one. We have the ability to help support or help them navigate that. There's kind of 3 main areas of work that we're doing on this interagency coordination piece. From left to right, on the left here, what we call the SHIP process, or the State Housing Interagency Partnership. This is basically a process by which our office kind of got a whole group of different state agencies that kind of touch on the development process, folks like OHCS, ODOT, folks like that. And basically brainstormed ideas with existing resources, existing staffing levels, what we can do to kind of help reduce some barriers to the development of housing, right? So like it doesn't require any legislative concept or anything like that, but what resources can we bring to the table to get some things that will help produce housing on the ground, right? That don't take, a whole significant initiative by itself. The second bucket of things that we're talking about here is a broader evaluation of state agencies' policies and programs. This is a report that we're going to be producing and delivering to the legislature in September of this year. My colleague Palmer Mason is leading that work, and he's been engaging with folks around the state so far. With the folks at, I believe, University of Oregon is who he's been partnering with on delivering that. And basically just looking at a broad tranche of like, hey, what are some existing state barriers that we know about that we could, intervene with different kind of like resources or policy concepts to help kind of reduce some of those barriers. And then the last bucket here, production navigation, I would call this more development specific. The idea is if you're a developer and you're like, oh man, I don't know anything about wastewater permitting, right? And I have to go through DEQ to get approvals. I don't know how to do that. Our folks at the navigation wing, they've done it, or they've basically have connections. They know the folks who work at DEQ. They've learned a lot about all these different existing programs, policies, resources that exist out there, and they can help kind of bridge that gap and help the project move along where it might otherwise kind of get stuck, especially if they don't know who to reach out to, right? So that's kind of the main thing there. This is not my area of focus. I'm more on the housing law side of things. But that's kind of a preliminary overview of that those navigation or coordination services that we provide. And then I'll move kind of to the last piece. So research and evaluation. There's kind of different areas that we provide here. The idea is that like we're basically an office of a lot of different kind of technical experts on different areas of housing production and development. And we have a role in kind of helping inform decision makers, helping inform practitioners of kind of things that are working well, things that aren't working well, and how we can kind of improve and reduce barriers to production, right? There's different ways that we do this. Examples include, resources that we can produce like fact sheets or model codes or permit-ready plans, things like that we have been working on and are continuing to work on. But one that I wanted to highlight for today's conversation is a report that we were directed to produce and are actively working on that's called our Process Improvement Study. Basically, the idea here is the legislature wanted to get a picture of the kind of housing development pipeline, all the way from kind of annexation through kind of certificate of occupancy that happens kind of at the end of the building code process, right? And there's a whole host of steps that happens in that process that relate to like, all right, how does development happen? How's the sausage made, and how do things move through this process? And of course, what's working well in different communities around the state and what isn't working so well, and where can we make improvements? So this was a legislative report that was directed to be delivered by September 15th of this year. It's a process that's kind of underway. My colleague, Ryan Marquardt is who's been leading that, and he's been engaging with different folks around the state to kind of get different folks' perspective of different local governments, of housing developers, about those things that are working well and things that aren't. And so, obviously, if you have questions or wanted to reach out, I'm happy to make that connection. And then I think, beyond that, there's obviously more that I could touch on. I think for the sake of time, I'm going to omit it, it's already gone long enough. And instead, we can kind of move into some question and answer that the commission might have for us, me or Ethan.
Well, thank you very much, Sean and Ethan. I appreciate the presentation. A lot of information there. And certainly it's good to know that the state is pushing and promoting housing and providing these resources and technical assistance. I think it'd be very valuable for smaller cities and cities that don't have the capacity in planning and building to do a lot of these things. And I'm proud of the efforts that Placer County has made. We've actually had a lot of success in partnering with cities and other nonprofits, and we've got a couple hundred units that we've been able to to put online in the last few years. So it's awesome. I guess my big feedback would be about the land use piece of it. You know, I think my familiarity is Warrenton, and wetlands is such a big issue when there's not an opportunity really to know clearly what your mitigation strategy should be on a project that would have real benefit to the housing inventory. But because wetlands, it just consumes areas of our county just because of where we live, we're right next to the water. There's not an ability to do something in a timely and make an investment in an area because it takes so long to work through a process, so long to get agreement on what a mitigation would look like so that you could fill an area to actually produce this housing. What is being done, I guess, to streamline the mitigation process so some of these projects can actually happen? Because I know a lot of them that have died because people can't wait around and get answers in a timely fashion, and investors just walk away, and things have not been able to materialize when they really should have, because these are properties that actually are very suitable for development.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. I can definitely, wetlands is a big thing that we've heard about a lot too, and it's something that has kind of resulted in a lot more, relationship building with our colleagues at the Department of State Lands. So DSL is the agency that kind of administers wetlands, and there's a relationship with land use regulations, right, in terms of how wetlands are developed, that type of thing. But there's also a broader kind of mitigation system that relies on credits that are kind of purchased on the open market, and therefore they've got to be produced, right? And that process can be somewhat delicate, that I've learned, and also a little bit sticky of a process. It can be hard to find credits to sufficiently mitigate to be able to build on wetlands, that type of thing. So as I understand it, there's a couple of things that are happening that relate to wetlands in the kind of interagency conversation that are a focus of those different reports. So what I can't say is where those conversations are at right now. So my colleague Palmer Mason, who's been leading that report, talking about the different barriers that exist to development, one of those that he is absolutely exploring, and we've definitely been hearing a lot about, is on that issue of wetlands and like what potential policy solutions might be able to happen to kind of take this existing process that can be, a little bit cumbersome and make it work better, right? I think in addition to that, what I'll add is that we have on the navigation side with developers, is basically just helping build this kind of better relationship and understanding with DSL around like, hey, how do they navigate your process? What does it take if we're doing wetland mitigation to get the sufficient credits? How can we actually help navigate that? And so those are kind of two different areas where we've been able to help plug in, even though we're not actually the administering agency for wetlands, right? So that's just to kind of answer that question. But we see this in a lot of different areas, right? Like you'd be surprised how often like wastewater becomes an issue. I had no idea what a grinder pump was until very recently, when I've learned from the very wise folks at the Department of Environmental Quality how important they are for adequate sewer. But I think basically the approach that we take on that kind of both sides of the ledger is on that, all right, interagency piece, how can we find kind of solutions to these different problems that we're hearing about? And then, of course, on the navigation side, really helping connect developers with the existing things that we have in place today, because sometimes just getting that information can go a long way.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. We're up against the hour here. Do we have any other questions real quick?
I think the floodplains and stuff. I'm just concerned about development and how feasible that actually is. I mean, it sounds great, but
yeah. And I think it's great too. I do like the idea of not operating in silos and working cooperatively from the state level, because I think we have experienced a lot of folks that are operating in their own sphere and they don't communicate. And I'm all for better communication amongst state agencies.
Yeah. Oh, and we see where that communication doesn't happen, it can result in conflict. So to the extent that we can kind of help bridge that gap, that's something that we're really trying to lean into.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sean and Ethan. Appreciate the presentation. Very good information. Thank you, Commissioner Thompson, for bringing it to us.
Thank you for having us.
Clatsop County, all county service districts for which this body so acts, and as the Clatsop County Local Contract Review Board is now meeting in regular session. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I want to welcome everybody here this evening. Clerk of the board, can we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Cueva,
Here.
Vice Chair Banks. Here. Commissioner Wakula,
Here.
Commissioner Webb.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson.
I'm here.
All right. We had an opportunity to review the agenda before the meeting. We have any questions or comments? Are we ready for a motion?
I move to approve.
Second?
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. First is a proclamation, National FFA Week, and our presenters are Charlie Hall, Oregon FFA Alumni and Supporters Council, student Shaylin Bangs, Astoria FFA, and Titus Kano, FFA Jewel Chapter President. If you all want to come up to the table here. Shaylin's taller than her mom. All right, I'll turn it over to you to make the presentation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Shaylin Bangs. I'm the Secretary of the Astoria FFA chapter and the Secretary of the Northwest District. FFA has mattered to me because of the social and friendship opportunities and the constant push for growth. Through FFA, I have grown not only as a leader, but as a person as well. Through FFA, I have been able to travel, grow socially, and better prepare for myself for my future career. And it has helped me grow as a student and leader by pushing me out of my comfort zone and allowing me to discover other interests I wouldn't have the inclination to explore. Astoria FFA is proud to be a thriving program serving 428 student members, making it the fourth largest FFA chapter in Oregon. Our chapter provides students with hands-on learning opportunities in agriculture, natural resources, leadership, and career development, helping them build real-world skills that extend far beyond the classroom. In 2025, Astoria FFA earned the 3-star National Chapter Award, the highest level of recognition awarded by the National FFA organization. This prestigious honor reflects excellence in student leadership, community engagement, and chapter development. This places Astoria FFA among one of the top chapters in the nation. Throughout the year, our members participate in career development events, leadership conferences, community service projects, and supervised agricultural experiences that connect learning to real careers and local needs. Astoria FFA students are not only preparing for careers in agriculture and natural resources, they are becoming confident leaders, problem solvers, and engaged citizens. During National FFA Week, we celebrate the impact FFA has on our students, our school, and our community, and we thank the Clatsop County Commission for its continued support of agricultural education and student leadership opportunities at Astoria High School. Thank you.
Well said. Very good. All right.
Hello, my name is Titus Kano, and I'm the president of the Jewel FFA chapter. FFA has taught me that if you want to be a leader, you need to lead by example, not just pushing your weight around, but showing people that you can do it, and so should they. Jewel FFA is proud in a newly rechartered chapter of the 2025 and 2026 school year, bringing agricultural education and leadership opportunities back to the Jewel community. Since rechartering, our members have been actively involved in the career development events, such as food science and job interview, with plans to participate in the dairy, veterinary science, nursery, floriculture, and forestry events, and the state convention by the end of the year. Through these experiences, students are building valuable skills in communication, teamwork, and career readiness. Jewel FFA is committed to living out the motto, learning to do, doing to learn, earning to live, and living to serve. through hands-on learning and service projects, including the development and support of our community and student-led community garden. This project helps provide food and for the student body and families while strengthening connections between students and agriculture for the greater of the Clatsop County community. We are proud to represent Jewel FFA and grateful for the continued support of our school and community. Thank you very much.
That's great. Both such great public speakers. Great job. Thank you so much for presenting this. And 428 students. I mean, how many students are there at Astoria High School? Man, that's just amazing. Yeah, that's great. Any comments?
I just have one. I saw a whole bunch of Blue Jackets at the state capitol today when I was there, and they were engaging in communication with all of their state leaders, and it was just impressive to see. I appreciated it. I'm really excited that they're learning these leadership skills and learning to engage now.
Yeah, that's great, and very important to preserve FFA.
Very.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move to approve the resolution and order proclaiming February 21st through 28th, 2026 to be National FFA Week and authorize the chair to read and then sign the proclamation.
I second. Moved and seconded to approve the resolution and order proclaiming February 28th or 21st through the 28th, 2026 to be National FFA Week and authorize the chair to read then sign the proclamation. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. In the matter of proclaiming February 21st through the 28th, 2026 to be National FFA Week. Whereas FFA and agricultural education provide a strong foundation for the youth of America and the future of food, fiber, and natural resources systems. And whereas FFA promotes premier leadership, personal growth, and career success among its members. And whereas agricultural education and FFA ensure a steady supply of young professionals to meet the growing needs in the science, business, and technology of agriculture. And whereas state, regional, county, and local governments are taking actions to address climate change, and that these efforts are led by elected officials and community partners. And whereas the FFA motto, learning to do, doing to learn, earning to live, living to serve, gives direction and purpose to these students who take an active role in succeeding in agricultural education. And whereas FFA promotes citizenship, volunteerism, leadership, patriotism, and cooperation. Now, therefore, be it hereby resolved that the Clatsop County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim February 21st through the 28th, 2026 as National FFA Week in Clatsop County, and we invite the community to celebrate FFA members, students, and their families, faculty and staff, participating businesses, alumni, and supporters of our local Astoria FFA chapter. Dated this 11th day of February, 2026, Clatsop County Board of Commissioners. And we'd like to take a picture with you.
Yeah.
So let's all come to the front and get a photo.
You want me to take it?
Okay.
Monica, take it.
Congratulations, guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks so much. Next item is Black History Month proclamation on page 14, and Don Boone, our county manager.
Thank you, Chair Quaylen, members of the board. Black History Month is a month-long commemoration of African American history and achievement The theme for Black History Month in 2026 is a century of Black history commemorations, marking 100 years since Dr. Carter G. Woodson's initial observance in 1926, and reflecting on the impact and future of these vital celebrations. The theme focuses on the significance of Black history, commemorations, and shaping identity, fostering pride, and advancing equality, encouraging exploration of Black contributions to national narratives and enduring cultural significance. Staff is asking that your board approve the resolution and order proclaiming February 2026 to be Black History Month and authorize the chair to read then sign the proclamation.
Thank you very much, Don. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the resolution and order proclaiming February 2026 to be Black History Month and authorize the chair to read and then sign the proclamation.
I second that motion.
Moved and seconded to approve the resolution and order proclaiming February 2026 to be Black History Month and authorize the chair to read, then sign the proclamation. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. In the matter of proclaiming the period from February 1st through February 28th, 2026 to be Black History Month. Whereas Black History Month provides an opportunity to recognize, celebrate, and honor the history, achievements, and contributions of Black Americans whose leadership, courage, creativity, and resilience have helped shape our communities, our nation, and the world. And whereas the Association for the Study of African American Life and History established the 2026 national theme, A Century of Black History Commemorations, marking 100 years of organized national recognition of Black history. And whereas this centennial moment invites communities to reflect on the purpose and impact of public commemoration, learning, teaching, and sharing Black history strengthens civic life, expands opportunity, and advances a more complete understanding of American history. And whereas the story of Black history is central to the American story, and recognizing Black history supports the values of dignity, belonging, and respect for all people, while helping ensure that future generations inherit a truthful, inclusive, and informed understanding of our shared past. And now, therefore, the Clatsop County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim February 2026 as Black History Month, honoring the theme, A Century of Black History Commemorations in Clatsop County, and encourages all residents to join in this observation, through learning, reflection, meaningful conversation, and community engagement in Clatsop County. Dated this 11th day of February, 2026, Clatsop County Board of Commissioners. All right, next is the consent calendar. Oh, no.
Business from the
Jeez,
public.
guys, I skipped ahead. Next is the business from the public. It's an opportunity for anyone to give a 2-minute presentation about any item on the agenda, except for public hearings, or any item of county concern that is not on the agenda. Clerk of the board, are there any members of the public signed up to speak remotely?
No, they're not.
Okay. Are there any members of the public signed up to speak in person this evening?
No, they're not.
Anyone that's here would like to give a 2-minute presentation? Okay. We'll go ahead and close business from the public and move on to the consent calendar at this time. Any questions or comments on the consent calendar? We have a motion.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
I second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar as presented. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. We'll start with commissioners' reports and Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Session is busy, but it also is balanced out by the presentation that we just had from the Department of Land Conservation and Development. One of the reasons I wanted them to come and talk to us is because we do have that high rate of homelessness. We do have a complex set of land use issues around the county, including the coastal residential region where people are very interested in land use issues. So I hope that having this presentation informs not only all of you sitting on the dais, but everyone who wants to listen to the recording as we go forward, as you can tell, listening to the staff presentations is like drinking from a fire hose. So imagine what you just had for an hour going on for 2 full days. It's a great learning experience, but it's really challenging. That land use occurs as I would say, a product of what the legislature has to say about what's good for Oregonians. And when the legislature is in session, that's really the focal point of their deliberations. When we met Monday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the House Revenue Committee to talk about the future of the transient lodging tax, what occurred there was a culmination of effort on the part of so many people, our staff, our legislators, Rep. Javity, Senator Weber, but the co-chair, one of the vice chairs of the committee was also a sponsor of that. We had a receptive hearing. I hope that as we go forward, the deliberation in front of that committee and the follow-up actions that happened the next day will bear fruit. Because what happened the next day was the whole executive team of the Association of Oregon Counties visited the legislative leadership, and one of the 3 or 4 points that was emphasized was that transient lodging tax. That will make such a difference for every recreational community. I'd emphasize that it produces adaptive management in the tourism lodging tax domain. It changes the power dynamic to put more control in the hands of you and me, colleagues, as elected representatives of the people of the area, so that we can look out for everybody. Representative Marsh, during that Revenue Committee hearing, asked, could elected representatives respond to the concerns of the tourism industry about whether or not their interests would be considered? I spoke to that, and what I said was, as elected county commissioners, we listen to everyone. We look out for our small businesses, we look out for our residents, and we care about the tourists who come to visit our areas. So it's our job to look out for everybody. And if we don't do it, we don't get elected and we don't get reelected. So I hope that it wasn't an argument. It was a position statement. I hope that it's effective. I hope that the efforts of everyone that have been so long-term result in a way of going forward so we can protect our businesses, protect our community, and be able to proceed in a way that's fiscally responsible. And thanks to everybody who had a part in this. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Thompson. I appreciate you bringing the DLCD presentation to us this evening. A lot of information there, very dense topic, but I thought very interesting. And again, there are some fundamental things that were kind of unveiled there, and it's really that communication between the state agencies that's so very important, because they can only do so much on the DLCD end without having cooperation from DSL, DEQ, and you name it. So we certainly want to promote housing, and there are, I think, opportunities to do it within Clatsop County, but we need help from the state to do it. So thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Webb?
Okay. I was very pleased to be able to be a part on my membership on the Oregon Coastal Zone Management Committee, which is a federally mandated, actually, association of counties along all of the coastal areas of the United States. And one of the things that we did, we sent out, and I'm sorry, I can't remember when it was, but it was sometime late last year, to all of our member counties, asking for voting on what were the priority issues for the coastal counties. And I particularly welcome this and my work on this committee because in Oregon, we talk a lot about urban Oregon and rural Oregon, but we don't always distinguish the differences among those two different entities in our county. And so it's nice to be in the room with the coastal folks. And we took a survey late last year about the priorities for the coastal counties. And I thought it was very interesting that when I surveyed my fellow commissioners, their priorities didn't always align with other counties. So at our meeting early this week, we came forth with the priorities, or the 6 priorities that the coastal counties are going to be working on, especially in this short session, but also in general. Number 1 was the TLT, which I was very pleased to have commission consensus with. One of the things I enjoy about the OCZM meetings is that there are more ports represented on this group than I'm accustomed to in our multi-jurisdictional meetings, and am sad that our ports are not a part of it, but that's something that we're going to take a closer look at. Number 3, priority was housing. I think very appropriate for this evening's meeting. Number 4 was disaster preparedness, which is something that I'm very committed to and wish we could do more. Number 5 is the blue economy. And number 6 is water conservation, which is, it's interesting to me that it's a very high priority in Eastern Oregon, but the fact that it's also a high priority in the coastal county. Okay, that's my report from OCZM, I think.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Appreciate your representation on a very important committee. Thank you. Commissioner Banks?
I had the opportunity to attend the Crabbers Association meeting in regards to the petition that's being sent into ODFNW and learned a lot. I am hopeful that the county will be able to write a letter of support of our industry and submit that here for the meeting that is to be at the end of this month. Moving on from that, I attended our Child Care Task Force meeting and had some really exciting news. We have 38 children on the wait list in Clatsop County. 28 of those children are infant and toddler. And that seems like a large number, but from the beginning of our task force engagement and scholarship program, we started with 92 infant and toddler slots in Clatsop County, and we are up to 159 slots. And so that just shows how effective that this scholarship program has been just for infant toddler, beyond the fact that we are now out of the preschool child care desert. When we looked at some numbers, for just this year alone, we've assisted 38 families. And 7 of those families are on an ERDC wait list. So they're yet to receive state assistance in order to receive child care. And at the end of the day, I absolutely love how effective that this model has been. And it is now being duplicated in Tillamook and Columbia County. And so hopefully, our neighboring counties will be able to garner the same amount of support from their community that we have been able to attract in order to move forward. We are stably funded for another grant round and are now looking at opening a website and an ability to log online and do a tax deduction donation. And so that is the direction that we are moving. It's just nice to see the numbers and nice to see the successes that we've achieved over the last almost 5 years. This is this is grant round 5 that we are currently in, and we will be moving into grant round 6 starting in June. We've pushed the grant round sooner so that approvals and monies can be available when the school year starts for providers. And we've really dialed in the process to now quarterly, and so we receive quarterly reports, quarterly successes, and if we need to pivot a little bit along the way. But again, I can't say enough thank yous to our community businesses who have supported this process and are continuing to support us. And so I hope that just continues. I was able to testify today for our Sustainable Harvest Bill that AOC and CFTLAC has continued to push forward, and fingers crossed that we have enough votes to move it out of committee. And I hope to hear about that soon. It was an exciting day in Salem, busy day in Salem, and a very fast trip there and back for me. Northwest Senior Disability Services is plugging right along. We approved a new biennium contract, and we are working on our contract for our unrepresented. And beyond that, and I feel like I've forgotten something, but okay, if I remember, I'll let you know.
No, thank you, Commissioner Bangs. And yeah, 5 years ago, to imagine that the Child Care Task Force would be where it is today,
Yeah.
I think it was beyond our comprehension. The vision we had and how cool it is that it's actually come true. I mean, it's
Like
fantastic.
working.
Yeah. No, and you can take a lot of credit for that. Thank you so much for all your efforts. Fantastic success story to tell. Okay, Commissioner Wakua.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, since our last meeting, I still don't have any updates with the 3 assignments being Public Safety, Property Appeals Board, and CEDAR. They're all scheduled for March, starting in the beginning all the way through the end. So I'll be reporting next month on those.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Wakua. I have COLPAC tomorrow, and we did have a presentation from Sarah Luheath, Executive Director of COLPAC, at our last work session. And I just wanted to confirm with everybody, the dues are going to $6,000 per year. Is everybody comfortable with that? Yeah, I think that she made a very good presentation and kind of delineation of what that money is spent for and why it's necessary. So appreciate her doing that. And as was mentioned in the work session, the all electeds meeting sometime early in March. Very important for us as a county and all of the cities and everybody that is elected to get together to talk about the big issues that impact everybody. 911 consolidation, emergency communications is certainly one of those. And I'm glad that we're going to be doing this hopefully next month, yeah, and getting everyone together. I'm sure there might be some other items that get added to the agenda, but this is something we need to do more regularly, getting everyone together, all on the same page, talking about the issues of importance, because I think we can all, we're much better when we work together. And then Amanda Rabenchek, thank you for all of your work in the short session and getting communications out to all of us. Thank you to Commissioner Bangs for testifying and Commissioner Thompson for testifying, the sheriff for testifying. I think it was said also in the work session that we have more of a presence down in Salem than we ever have. That's a big credit to our county manager, to CFM Advocates for their efforts down there. And I appreciate, getting these letters of support cranked out in such short fashion. I know the county manager's been doing several of them, Amanda and Monica. but it's just so important to keep lending our voice to the things that matter to us. And there's certainly, never a lot of time to craft those, but they're really well done, and thanks again. I don't think I have anything else. County Manager?
Chair Quiller, members of the board, just on that topic the chair was mentioning, I did send an email today with a draft of the ODFW letter, so if you get a chance to take a look at that, it's regarding the Dungeness crab fishery. So, and I do apologize, there are a lot of emails that are coming from various staff with letters, and it's unfortunate that we don't have a lot of time, and we try to give you a time frame. What I will say is that staff is always available if you want to talk to us about the letters, about what the context is behind the letters. I sometimes wish we had more time to talk through those issues, but things are just rocketing at that kind of a pace. So bear with us, but if you have any questions or concerns as we go through it, just give me a call and we can talk through that. And besides that, Chair, I don't have any other updates.
And County Manager, I mean, sometimes we don't know when a hearing is. You'll find out just the day before, and then you have 48 hours to submit whatever testimony you're going to submit. So the time frame is so compressed, and this is the short session on top of it, so they're trying to do a lot more than they have the capacity to do. But again, I think been a great effort by everyone here to make sure that we are lending our voice where needed. Okay, we'll move on to the business agenda. Appointments to the Recreational Lands Planning Advisory Committee on page 118, and Corey Johnson. Park Supervisor, welcome.
Hello. So, like I told you folks at the work session, Matthew Grantham is seeking reappointment to our committee, our Recreational Lands Committee. He's been outstanding, and I'm recommending that you please reappoint him. He's been a great contributor. We've recently just had a small committee meeting about planning for Carnahan County Park development, and he's been extremely helpful in those respects. So respectfully, I'd ask you to reappoint him.
Yeah. And thank you, Corey. And we did have a discussion during the work session, and then we certainly value consistency on that board and having folks that have some experience, and then the team is working very well as it is now. So points well taken. We do have another applicant, Samuel Peterson, who has applied and well qualified as well. But certainly I do value, the experience of Matthew Grantham, and like to keep that momentum. Any other comments?
I'd like to say that, yes, we recently had a meeting of this group, and it's always, it always feels good to me to go to these meetings, because of all, it just astounds me, in a good way, the extent to which the citizenry of this county comes forward and gives their perspective on things. We had a wonderful presentation on the part of staff that I hope will be very soon coming before the board about, well, first of all, of course, we're considering the final arrangements for the updates and for Carnahan, for one of our popular parks, and it was and there's a fee, and I wanted to ask our county manager, have all of the departments been asked to prepare similar analyses of costs, et cetera, for that have been, they're called a fee analysis, but it's not our usual. It's Am I making any sense?
I'm not sure. I mean, the county does go through a fee schedule analysis every year. We look at all of our fees and we do the analysis on what the true cost is to make sure that we're recovering the cost of the services that we're providing. So I'm not sure if you're referring to that, Commissioner, or something else.
I think maybe I need to ask Corey if that's the case.
Sure. So in the last Rec Lands Committee meeting, I presented, I collected some data from other municipalities, counties, state parks, Washington state parks, basically what they were charging for their fees, and then collated that all and packaged it and presented it to the Rec Lands Committee. And I'm actually hoping to present it to you folks too. I was originally just planning on presenting it as part of our regular fee schedule adjustment that you folks typically consider in the June, July timeframe. But given budget discussions, I'm hoping to appear for you sooner.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
So it sounds like it's generally about the routine process that might get accelerated, it sounds like. So.
Except this is such a broader analysis. And because I'm hoping that this year we're going to be able to do a real honest to goodness update of our Parks Master Plan. And this is wonderful input to that. And so I really do that we can make. I'd also like to also advocate for Matthew Grantham. It's so helpful to us locally to have someone from ODF on this committee, because their parks efforts are so much larger than ours. And Matthew has incredible background, really amazing, both education and experience with parks management, et cetera. And he's been wonderful on this committee. It's amazing. If you look at the other members of the committee, there are 3 members who are local folks who actually were on the last master plan committee. And they're people who've been in Clatsop County for many, many years. They're now, one of them is a part of the Seaside Parks Committee. And so they bring they're a great group. They're very broad-based and very knowledgeable and very concerned. We have great attendance at these meetings. People rarely don't show up. I mean, it's really, really wonderful. So I would like to generally, I move that the board appoint Matthew Grantham to fill the county-wide position on the Recreation Lands Planning and Advisory Committee.
Second. Moved and seconded that the board appoint Matthew Grantham to fill the countywide position on the Recreational Lands Planning and Advisory Committee. All those in favor signify with an aye. 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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Thank you very much, Corey.
Thank you.
Okay, next is a public hearing, ordinance 26-06, an ordinance amending Clatsop County Code 5.20. First reading on page 123. This is the time set for a public hearing on ordinance 26-06. County Council, may we have the first reading by title only?
This is ordinance 26-06 in the matter of an ordinance amending Clatsop County Code section 5.20.
Thank you very much, County Council. All right, and now we'll have the staff report by Kelly Bratton, Director.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. This is the amendment that I promised. We had a work session in October of 25, talking about the opting into the state's tobacco retail license and amending this ordinance is the first step to opting in. So we've had a few meetings, one with OHA to let them know of our intention to opt in, and also one with the Department of Revenue to make sure we have an IGA to essentially collect or get the reimbursement for the work we do.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly. Do you have any questions? All right. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on ordinance 26-06. Does any commissioner have a conflict of interest to report?
No.
Not seeing any. Clerk of the board, are there any members of the public signed up to speak remotely?
No, there's not.
All right. Are there any members of the public signed up to speak in person this evening?
No, there is not.
Okay. Anyone that's here would like to speak on this issue? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Actually, yeah, we'll close the public hearing on ordinance 26-06. And there is a suggested motion to continue the public hearing. Do we have that motion?
I move we continue the public hearing on this matter to our February 25th, 2026 meeting and conduct the second reading at that time.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we continue the public hearing on this matter to our February 25th, 2026 meeting and conduct the second reading at that time. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
All right. We don't have any other items on the agenda. Anything for the good of the order? All right, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Have a great evening.